that isn't an answer. The superintendent, we could either fold it into the larger effort or go down this path, or both and, I guess.
Brad?
I mean, that makes sense to me, even if we did a sample of something, at least start doing some analysis of it so that we're gathering that so we can really appreciate it. It may affect what we ultimately do on some days.
Well, let me ask John. John, is that something that the department has capacity to do?
I'm not sure about the analysis, but that would be something that we'll look into seeing if that's a possibility. I don't know if we could have, if we do have, for example, the state board ask us.
Actually, could I have you come up and speak on the microphone, because we are
You've been away so
recording.
long, John. It's good to have you back.
I apologize. My name is John Wolf. But we do have the elementary reading plan that, every elementary school must provide to us by the June 30th of every school year. So we do have that data. And wrapped inside of that, we do have all the interventions that schools utilize, any type of assessments that they utilize, the core reading program, communication with parents, and that's all wrapped up in their elementary program. So that would give us one piece of an analysis if you want to look at that across the board. We have 3 years of data in that.
Yes, Brad?
John, is there data that comes in with that would also let us look at whether or not there's been a reduction in the number of students that need to be retained in reading?
No, we do have only an area that, explains what they would do if they have any child that did not pass iRead 3.
Okay.
We wanted to know the remediation process. That could be something that we could add, through the IT department, that we would ask schools to, provide that information.
Well, we could quantify it though, right? Because we know how many are being remediated, so
So we would have the number of students
Yeah.
that did not pass,
Yeah.
and then, but we would have to work with Michelle Walker's group and find out, what is the number after the summer additional assessment.
That's a piece that I'm interested in when I saw the Ridgeway Graphic in July is that language, because as a former elementary principal, I understand the logic behind it, but I wanted to see how is that going to play itself out, because it's one of those things where if parents are in it, it works well. Sorry, if the parents are in it, it works. I can't learn it today. If parents are in it, it works well. If they're not, it could be a problem. It'd be a piece of data I'd like to see. I'm just curious.
So are members of the board requesting some kind of report? I'm not sure what you want.
Can't link it to the scores, though?
What is it what specifically are you wanting to link to scores, Andrea?
Well, to see if since implementation of iRead, there's been a effect on ISTEP, fourth grade ISTEP scores.
I'm not sure, and I could work with, Debbie and Michelle and look at those, analysis pieces, but I'm not sure. We could pull the elementary reading plan, but we could get back with you to see if that is a possibility.
I tell you what, Andrea, if we have part of our state assessment that has reading information, then we can actually say, here's the correlation of having accountability by grade 3, and here's what it's done in an increase of our reading scores. Part of the problem that we have in Indiana is we don't collect any reading data from our ISTEP. We just have language arts scores. So the improvement of the scores aren't necessarily correlated directly with the reading component. But I'm hoping going forward that we will have reading information that we will be able to totally correlate with what you're wanting, because I am in total agreement. We have to see where our kids are in reading, and we can correlate any then of our programs to see if it's having an effect on the reading scores of the kids.
You are correct. There wouldn't be a clear
Right.
correlation between the
Yeah.
two.
Right.
Yes, Michelle?
Was hoping to contribute to the conversation. I do think that there are data points that would be valuable for the analysis. We have what you would want to do is longitudinally track the students since we've been administering the iRead. And we obviously have those data points, and then we have the ISTEP ELA data points. And I think that there could be a correlation. You wouldn't be able to go into a causal analysis, but you could do a correlation study and see what kind of information that
Yeah, we certainly can give you that kind of data. I'm just not sure the correlation's going to be there to reading.
Better than nothing.
Yeah.
Would.
Yeah,
would
PJ?
Would that data include the students that were retained? Because I think that's, Superintendent alluded to, I've got 100 kids in my 5th grade class or 3rd grade class. 7 of them get retained. Well, next year's ISTEP scores will look a lot better because those 7 students that obviously struggled in 3rd grade aren't in my cohort anymore. So I
Yeah.
would think we would need to keep those students that were in that original 3rd grade class. If we're going to do apples to apples,
Watching them.
that group needs to be included in that 4th grade class, even though they're not considered 4th grade students.
Absolutely, and certainly not suggesting a model right now because this is kind of off the cuff and it's an area of expertise particularly for Dr. Michelle Walker or Molly Chamberlain, Deb Daly. They are quantitative methodology experts. I only have enough to be dangerous, but I would imagine that you could actually, while we start with the year that we began implementing iRead 3, you also have the ISTEP results for that same year. You could back up a year and find students who scored similarly on the ISTEP ELA portion and see how they did the next year and compare that to the students who took the iRead and ISTEP and if they were retained or promoted and what happened with those students. I think there would probably be some really rich information that this would yield, but it would be something that the ladies I just mentioned would be the best folks to develop a model.
Well, I'll have the department start to see what we can pull together. And John, I'd also like to suggest that I think it would be beneficial to actually have just a compilation of interventions that are being used by schools and just kind of have an overall view of the intervention process itself and what's out there and what's been happening. Tony?
Does the state collect any data on student performance in reading K-1 and 2?
No, we do
No.
not have that, other than we do have a state assessment through Amplify M-Class, so you would get some formative information, but not all schools use that again. Again, all schools use a variety of tools in
there's
K-1, 2.
nothing we really know as DOE about reading performance in kindergarten, first, and second grade. The earliest we really know is when they're passing the televised.
In 3rd grade.
Yeah, not yet, Tony.
Yes, I think we need to do something before they get the iRead 3. I like the
But again-
NOEA personally.
The schools
Tony,
know.
many schools
Schools
actually
have
do
data.
many
Schools do.
things.
Yeah.
Individual schools are doing
So
that.
they
But it's
have-
all
Schools have it in
different.
place, it's just not reported.
They're
Exactly.
using
Oh, well,
different
then that's easy. So
instruments.
And the
stuff.
data, because the state doesn't do it,
Yeah,
right, and because the
it's
state doesn't do it, the data doesn't follow the child from place to place.
May I to take us,
Dan?
I'm not sure exactly, correct me, but if we started some rule-making on the reading, we're going to start doing some research, focus conversations with folks who do this every day, kindergarten, first, second grade, teachers, et cetera. That could eventually fold into a comprehensive system. So if we start the process, we're moving along, there'll be decisions we can make throughout, but we want to collect data, we want to get a lot of learning, we want to visit with the professionals, we want to continue some of the work, John, seemed like we were doing along the way there to get folks engaged in the discussion and analyzing the art and science of teaching, reading. So if you start a rulemaking process, it could always lead us to folding it into a comprehensive standards and assessment system and not as a separate piece. Would you say that's correct? Would you agree with that?
Well, let me, Michelle, a question, or Maggie or Christy. Starting the rulemaking process, like soon though, might get finished before we're done with the other assessment piece.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
Usually a rule, I mean, you could
'Cause
do
it
a
takes so
rule-
long to do a
I was gonna
rule.
say, I mean, and if you're really, really fast and everything goes perfectly, which means not usually during a legislative session where folks are doing other fiscal analyses, you might be able to complete a rule in 6 or 7 months, but it usually takes a year. It really usually takes 9, 10, 11 months. But I do think that, if I heard Dan correctly, I think that there's something to consider. That if you're wanting to do all of this, if you're wanting to do a data analysis, you might want to leave things as are until you complete the data analysis, just so that you're not in any way affecting the data you're gathering by changing something in the process. So it's something to consider. I'm not saying that you have to do that, and obviously you wouldn't be changing it immediately by having the rule, but it could be changed the way folks are thinking about the implementation. But also correctly noted, if you were to begin one, you would have the option to modify it in the process until you actually post your proposed language, and then you have some limitations on what you can do in changing the final language, and then you would also, of course, have the option to withdraw it. So,
My personal preference from the department is to pretty much do what BJ suggested on the outset, is just kind of leave it. And let's have this longer conversation, gather some data, and based upon the assessment conversation that we're going to have, I think teachers would prefer to see changes at one time rather than here's a change and here's a change and here's a change. And so that my preference is to really drive each one of them through the larger conversation.